Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. And a woo-goo to all of you. Hello, I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And if you were watching the video version, you can see our super special guest. And we have Michael Clue. And we have, once again, Rob and the COVID Master Dunkelberger.
Hello, everybody.
Oh, Rob, thank you so much for joining us, especially Rob, who has been recovering. Ryan has it now. Just kidding.
I was afraid I'd give it to one.
I didn't realize it was. I didn't.
It transferred electrically.
Oh,
if you needed something else to be scared of in today's world,
the new variant is the internet, is the Zoom variant. All right, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. We are super happy to have all of you with us. Thank you for the last 2 weeks. A lot of the nice comments coming up for our Anna Isabel episode. That was really a lot of really nice things that y'all are saying. So thank you so much. And if you haven't checked out that episode, I highly recommend that you do so. All right, today, as you can tell, if we have two guests and there's two hosts, that means that we are having a double feature. It's a double feature day. Yep. We have Woo-Goo. And we are, let's see. So today we are talking about, let's talk about the parameters of what we talk, of the rules, basically the rules where they had to have some linking element, right? And so each of us chose two movies that had some sort of linked element. And let's, I'm just realizing I lost one of my tabs here because, we're actually going to be able to kind of go in order. Chronologically, these movies allow us to sort of talk about them in person order, starting with Mr. Rob's movies. Rob hops us into the Wayback Machine.
Mm-hmm. That's Rob's specialty.
Yeah,
we all choose two movies for each other to watch. No offense, Joel, but you lost your tab when you were kind of in the middle of this. And then we all have to watch them. It really is as simple as that, but that's the nice way you have to say it. These are homework assignments that we sign to each other as film fans. And the other thing I would say about it before we get into the movies, which we got to do because we got 8 movies to get through between the four of us. My God, it's going to be a cacophony of opinions and celebrations and contention. And we try and pick movies that they can be classics or whatever, but we do try and pick ones that where just for Joel and I's sake, that are not their own shows or that are not based in filmmakers, like the Coen brothers or something, where that show, those discussions really going to happen. So we're trying to pick these things out. They are, although Rob's films, as always, predate all of us by quite a bit, we do try and pick things that have personal meaning to us as well, as best we can. And I think you'll definitely find that these, for any of their flaws or whatever, have really, really warm spots in the assigners' hearts. And that's what's fun about it. I mean, that's what's exciting about it. So there you go.
Yeah, so let's hop in the Wayback Machine all the way back to 1944. Oh, the world was a much simpler place then, where Edward G. Robinson was a sex symbol. And let's talk about our first two movies are Fritz Lang's The Woman in the Window and Scarlet Street. All right, yeah, let's hit it. Rob, go.
Okay.
Woman in the Window.
Well, I picked these films because they were really surprises to me when I discovered them. Sort of late discoveries. I always thought of Edward G. Robinson more or less as a gangster. Mm-hmm. And really, when you look at his filmography, that's how he got his start. But he's got a lot of roles like these where he's just not that character. And it was his performance, particularly in The Woman in the Window, which is the film I saw first, that really surprised me. And what's interesting is he made The Woman in the Window in 1944, Fritz Lang did, and then he made Scarlet Street in 1945, both with Edward G. Robinson, and the other two leads, Joan Bennett and Dan Dura, are
oh my God, Dan Dura.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
if nothing else, thank you for that.
Yeah.
So awesome.
So The Woman in the Window is a story of just an average middle-aged professor who his wife and kids, he sees them off at the train station for the summer, and he's just gonna be home. He's gonna keep out of trouble. Goes to his club, sees this picture, this portrait hanging in the window, and sort of falls in love with her. And then he goes in, talks with his friends about, well, we're middle-aged, and they're like, oh, you're gonna get into trouble with the wife away? And he's like, that's where I'm beyond that,
Yeah, you can he can talk about it like the like it's like 1944 club version of locker room talk. Oh, she's oh, maybe we'll go out to the clubs or get a stripper over here to the men's club or whatever. No, and it's just all talk there. They're just like, okay.
Movies from this era, and not just this era, but this is a style of film, but the fact that they discuss everything and set up everything that is thematically going to happen in the movie in this very convenient, set early in the film, philosophical discussion between these friends is, I mean, in a way it's corny, but in a way it's like, it's wonderful. It's because it makes it so clean and you're able to follow each idea through, you know what I mean? So I love the opening. So really any scene with those three guys is delightful. Yeah. But that opening one is really fantastic.
Yeah, and he's got his friends. One's a doctor and one's the DA, and both of those play an important role later in the film. He heads out that first evening late, heading home, stops and looks at the portrait again because it's right next to his club, and he sees the reflection in the window of the woman in the portrait. So he turns around, they get to talking, and he ends up going back to her place. Nothing happens. Nothing illicit happens. We're not sure if it could. Yeah. But nothing does. And then her boy.
But it's enough in this time for him to just have gone back to her.
Yes. Yeah. He's clearly smitten. He's smitten. He's a smitten kitten. And
we know that, but it's just him being there is scandalous enough, actually, in 1944.
For sure. Yeah.
And that becomes the issue because her lover, who I think is her sugar daddy, pays for the apartment and everything, shows up and flies into a rage when he sees Edward's character and attacks him. And in self-defense, Edward ends up killing him.
Mm-hmm.
With the scissors, because they needed the scissors to open the wine bottle or champagne bottle.
All of that setup. It's like
as soon as they bring the scissors out, I'm like, somebody's going to get stabbed with the scissors.
But I didn't mind all this telegraphing. I'm like, oh my God, it's coming, but it's so well done.
It was delightful.
Was brilliant. Yeah.
And then they have to decide what to do. And like Ryan said, just him being there could destroy his entire life.
Yeah,
it was self-defense. They'd be perfectly justified calling the police, explaining what happened. But
should they have done that? They really should have, shouldn't they?
Well, yeah.
There were some poor choices made.
Well, yeah, but even but like, to me, that's one of the best moments of the film. It's very early on. It's Edward G. Robinson's. He's just there going. He's like, whatever we do, I'm done. My life is finished.
Yep.
And it just, I mean, you're talking about Rob, how he's this, we all know him as this gangster, see, but he's so like beaten and pathetic in that moment, and I say pathetic in that in that not in a degrading way or anything. It's just he's like, that's it, I'm done.
He's out of his element.
Yep.
Well, and I've seen this sort of thing happen in different movies throughout the years, but my favorite thing about this scene is that she waits really, really patiently while he works all this out in front of her. And then when he comes to the suggestion that maybe we could just, cover this up and pretend this didn't happen. And when he does that, she's like, please, that, part C. She's like,
she's scared of jail, which is interesting.
No, but she's not begging him the whole time can't tell the cop, you can't. She just kind of lets him go through the motions, think about the options. And I don't think it feels like it's like a woman being subservient to the problem solving man in the room, but that's obviously not what it is. We learn enough throughout the movie that, and yet she's not playing him either. Her reactions, at least I feel she wasn't, her reaction to that, to him suggesting that was, oh yes, please, that, where we could just pretend this never happened. Like that's what we all want so desperately.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it was very genuine and really awesome by the actor. And it was an interesting choice in the writing, I thought.
And at this moment, you're on their side still. I mean, I feel like you really stay on their side throughout the film, but they make decisions where you're like, nah, you've gone too far.
I'll respectfully disagree.
Far, that you've made just ridiculously dumb decisions.
Like,
come on,
Right. And they take a point. They reach a point where they decide to take someone's life rather than in self-defense a life was taken. But Joan Bennett's character in this film, I so much prefer it to the character she plays in the next film.
Man.
In this one, she is not manipulative. She is just like him, out of her league, worried their lives can be ruined because of this thing that was basically self-defense, not their problem or not their fault.
No, he's strangling him to death. I mean, he's just strangling him to death. It really, there's no ambiguity at all in the crime itself. Absolutely, something had to happen. Although it is a little weird. She doesn't stab him in the back. While he's getting strangled, she just quick hands him the scissors.
Here, have a scissors.
Which I always thought, it's just worth noting.
What I love about Joan Bennett's character in this, though, because the whole time, of course, I'm thinking Barbara Stanwyck double, and I feel like it's going to be one of those situations that never comes to fruition. Right. But I love the fact that when he returns, with his car to kind of handle the situation, she's like, I already took out all his belongings. I mean, it's like, I love the fact that she had the mindset to do that, because like you said, initially she's like, just let's do that. But she actually has, something that he probably might not have thought of, I love that about her.
Yeah. She got proactive.
Yeah.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Well done.
Basically at this point, they're tied together like in double indemnity, where, once you've committed a murder or a crime together, and self-defense murder, to be fair, you're linked together.
Yeah.
And from here, they decide to try and cover it up, and it kind of goes south. And one of the issues is that his friend, the DA, is working on the case. And
although that's actually
that helps them.
It helps him. Yeah. It helps. Yeah. It's greatly to his benefit that that's true, because he absolutely cannot imagine his friend having anything to do with this, even though there's tons of evidence right in front of him throughout that suggests the opposite.
All of that Robinson's character choices, like when he blurts out, well, how do you know he's murdered? And then when he takes on the path, I'm like, could you screw this up
I know.
anymore? Like we're screaming at the television, dude.
Right.
No.
He's not a smooth operator at all.
Right.
That's for sure.
Which
he is,
but he plays it cool in some moments when they talk about the cut on the guy. First thing he does is like this, like he doesn't panic in that moment. So there's,
looks like Poison Ivy. Oh, why'd they cover that up? Oh, that was Poison Ivy. The DA isn't terribly bright either. Let's be honest.
Also, when he's hiding the body, the look he gets from the cop, the motorcycle cop or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's so
good.
But
it's so,
sort of what's
hey,
endearing.
Buddy, I'm going to remember you for the rest of my life. I'm looking right at you. It's so, it's heavy, but it's very funny.
I think those mistakes he makes, those stumbles, are sort of what's endearing and what's actually feels real about it, because he isn't a gangster. He isn't a career criminal. He is completely out of his elements, and
there's forensic stuff that they were doing in 1944 that I think that audiences were learning about probably for the first time.
Yeah,
I'm like, we're in Dexter territory 60 years ago. This is great.
Yeah.
Kind of crazy.
It is weird. It's a weird look on Edward Robinson. It because we associate him so strongly with a tough. To see him the furrowed brow of someone's hamster, running quickly in the wheel trying to think of something, it looks, it's from I guess looking back, watching it now, watching him in 1944 with this preconceived notion of him, it looks weird on him. I'm not saying it's bad. It's just it looks. It's
kind of funny. Just as you're not wrong. That's true, and that's the delight of it. Although, I know Edward G. Robinson from his post Tommy Scare late 60s and early 70s films where he really is this almost diminutive, smallish figure in these films that he's in. He's the sidekick or he's whatever, and he's always kind of a weak and insecure guy to one degree or another. So
this is my first exposure to him beyond Soylent Green. Like literally, this is the second and third film of his that I have seen.
Well, there you go.
Really? You never watched? We didn't
never
watch
saw
any
Double Indemnity?
We never watched any of that stuff in Ted Morris's film classes.
Ted Larson? No, I don't.
Ted Larson's.
I don't think I did. I can't recall ever having seen any Edward G. Robinson films in any of Ted's classes. Oh, so this is all new to me.
I've certainly never seen any of his gangster films. In all honesty, except.
I mean, that's
except
what, like I
having
said,
seen other people pretend to be Edward G. Robinson in gangster movies, and
other
movies.
Yep. Yeah.
So I know the legend and the reputation, but
I
haven't watched them.
My exposure to him as a gangster is clips and documentaries, but my first is probably Looney Tunes.
Sure.
Yeah, that's what.
They do a caricature of him.
Yep.
I was so deeply impressed with his work in both films, and they were such different characters. And
it's so subtly played.
Shocked. I was shocked. Right? Like, this guy's got some serious abilities here that I never would have anticipated.
They're not subtle movies, and yet he's very grounded in reality in a wonderful way. That's very, very watchable, even by a modern audience, I think.
Yeah, I mean, there's an element to both of these movies that is so wonderfully convoluted. The plots are just, it's like the choices are wrong and set off a chain of events in everything, and then something else happens. Well, and when we get to Scarlet Street, the big reveal 3/4 of the way through the movie of a character, just like what. I do want to give a shout out to Spanky McFarland.
God.
As the most memorable Boy Scout ever.
So funny.
Oh my God, that was him?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
There's another our gang guy in the movie somewhere too.
Oh yeah.
But the
Robert
big one
Blake.
is Spanky. Yeah.
I had no idea it was him. I just remember that was like we were laughing hysterically. That was so
when the Boy Scout comes on the screen.
Oh my God.
It was so spectacular.
Yeah.
And to do it in that newsreel sort of way, and him.
It was.
I was just walking through the woods, getting my badge.
The big reveal, which we won't spoil, but I prior to that, this movie blew me away. Like the transition into the big reveal was mind-blowingly good. I was so excited by that. And then we looked it up to figure out what they had done, and I'm like, oh, that was. But everything leading up to that, everything leading up to that though was pretty heartbreaking. You know, because the way Lang shoots it as he moves into the bathroom, I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
And I mean, they've set it up very early, you know, and that really hurt. It hurt really bad.
Yeah.
So I was kind of relieved by the reveal.
Before we get to the end, and I think we need to be spoiler free.
I don't think we should do that. I had the opposite reaction. I was like, how dare you make me go through all this for real, and then not.
But
I stood up and screamed F off at the screen when it happened, which is a reaction. So it was, I can't say that, you know, it didn't get a reaction out of me, but I
didn't yell F off at the
I literally moment. Stood up and started shouting at the movie.
I agree, but I'm in the same camp as you, Ryan. Mine was when he was just getting his hat. And I was just like, and I can't. There's to end it on kind of a shticky joke.
I loved that.
Did you? Oh, I hated it.
Oh my god!
Oh, I was so mad at it.
Can I get a light? No.
I loved hating it. I guess is what I would say.
You know, maybe that's right, Ryan. Maybe it is a matter of like
I really hated it.
I loved how much I hated it.
But I loved hating it. There was something about it where it was like, I'm gonna get you.
Over the years, that's been done. So I'm looking at it from the perspective of when this was released.
Yeah, and I was trying
pretty new.
Yeah.
You know?
And that's the thing about that, and so many things throughout the film is this is the time of the production code.
Right.
The things they got away with.
Yeah.
Like
quite a bit, actually.
He obviously set up this apartment. That guy comes over and sleeps with her.
Yep.
3 or 4 times a week or something.
Yep.
They had to end it the way they did.
Didn't have to.
Well, they
didn't have to. I mean, it was
because you couldn't show suicide successfully because of the production code. That was a limitation.
That's true. But the way they did it was so artistic and sorrowful and brilliant that I don't know with that. I don't either. But they didn't have to. I mean, and then the way this is good because they weren't being forced to. And the next movie, the next year, is a kind of perfect example of where they didn't do something like this.
Right.
And yet it was because it was an artistic choice by the filmmakers. It's done really, really well. That really helps. It helps me make my peace with it inside because
I always.
And I was going to say, what was I going to say? I was going to make a joke about those stupid hats, the barbershop quartet hats that pop up in both of these movies. But how the blackmailer and how the millionaire murder victim both have the same stupid hat. I just think that's really awesome for some reason. I don't know why. And it's not just he wears the same kind of hat in the next film. It's the exact same hat.
Before we go into Scarlet Street, I just wanted to say too, the only version I was able to find was some horrifically computerized, colorized version.
That's the version I watched too.
Was dreadful.
Yeah, that's the version I watched too.
Luckily,
that's too bad, you guys. It's a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, the characters in the story had to speak for it because visually it was all over the place. Yeah,
you can imagine what it was, right? In black and white with him out in the woods, by the fence. It's full of, it's drippy with great old black and white noir atmosphere.
Yeah.
And even before anything happens, that's too bad.
Yeah.
Colorization.
And the print on Woman in the Window is better than the Scarlet Street Blu-ray, which is acceptable. But the Woman in the Window print is really nice.
Stunning.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Let's go ahead and move on to, unless Rob, we'll give you the last word on Woman in the Window, and then let's move on to Scarlet Street.
I did want to mention Dan Dura,
oh my God,
who comes in to blackmail them because he was following the victim, so he knows something's up. He doesn't know what was up.
Never seen him before, or if I have,
I loved him.
Yeah. I loved him too. I loved every single choice he made, and every single thing he did. He's I like him a little bit better in this film than the next one, although he's brilliant in the next one too, because I just think a little bit of his weird twitchy goofiness goes a long way. And I think you get a little sick of him in the next film. But even in that film, it couldn't be anybody else. He's so
smarmy. Just
oh my God, he's just
with smarm.
And yet he shares a little bit of personal vulnerability with us that I really appreciate. So I just think that guy's fantastic.
Yeah.
Rob, what did you want to say about him?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that we talked about him.
Oh, okay, sure.
And the other thing about this film is I love how another film I really love, and I think, Joel, you're a fan too, is Laura. And this does something similar to Laura in which it introduces the main character in this portrait. You see the portrait, you see people's fascination with it, because all three of the friends have noticed the photo and
Laura's coming up in a future show where we're calling it Rob brings us the classics. I don't know what we're gonna call the recurring segment yet, but he's already digging back through some old movies for us to get more into.
Speaking of Ted Larson, that is one that I couldn't decide on a film, and Ted just goes, "I think you should watch Auto Premier's Laura," and it was a game changer.
He was right.
Yeah, he was absolutely right. I loved it.
I credit the late great Ted Larson with introducing me to My Man Godfrey, which is one of my all-time favorites.
Me too.
Ted, if you guys don't know, because we're name dropping him like he's Tom Hanks or something. It was our film. It was part of the communications department at the college we all went to, Minnesota State Moorhead, or as it was known at the time, Moorhead State University. And he left a big impression on all of us, I think, from that.
The man's classic movie print collection, unrivaled. And we would get to watch these old silent films, and he would get this guy who was an accordion, play an organ, and he'd live accompany these things, and so we could watch him in class, and it was it's the best.
And he was he was a lot of things. He was a wonderful guy, but he was in a lot of ways an old movie character himself.
Yeah,
and a lot,
which with all the fun eccentricities of a guy who's up on the screen in front of you. And so we tease him and mock him, and we all do impressions of him.
But
we adore him.
That's exactly right. We
1944.
Your various materials.
Materials. Rest in celluloid
peace,
power. Ted Larson, not a good man. Let's move on to Scarlet Street, the second film. Saying, like we pointed, like Rob pointed out at the top, everybody's back. Everybody's back to work on Scarlet Street.
It's neat. It's like a rep theater company, where everyone, is doing the next show. And
of all the double features, Rob's was the most cohesive in at least 1,500 different ways. And
no doubt.
I literally, because this is the only true double feature I did was this and Scarlet Street. And by the end, I'm like,
which movie was that?
It all started to melt. It was
the Venn diagram of these two movies is almost a circle.
Yeah.
So Scarlet Street,
down to a woman in the window in artwork.
Yeah.
Of course, the second one is Katy Perry in the window, but
Yeah.
Katy Perry in the window.
She looked just like Katy Perry.
So Scarlet Street. This is another, just unusual role for Ed, as we'll call him.
We're tight. We're close at this point.
At least for those of us who went in with preconceived notions of Little Caesar and, a tough-nosed guy. This guy's even more
or Key Largo,
timid.
Right?
Yeah, Key Largo. Oh, that's a great film too. Oh. Michael, that's another one.
I didn't mean to bring that up. I'm just saying another famous Edward G. Robinson film.
Yep. So in this one, he's an even more timid person. He's just a clerk, and it opens at his 25th anniversary party for being a clerk for this business, and again, he's going home late at night, and he comes to the rescue of this girl who's being kind of manhandled by what we learned is her boyfriend, Dan Dura. Again, the woman is Joan Bennett, and he kind of fights the guy off and then runs to grab a policeman. When he comes back with the policeman, the bad guy's gone, and he just sort of falls instantly in love with Joan Bennett's character, who in this film is the complete opposite of what she was in Woman in the Window. This woman, I'm sure all of us watch her and cannot stand her. Where in the first one, you're sympathetic to her.
Yeah.
Because she's just like him.
Yeah, but I don't want to go so far as to say I can't stand her. She's a manipulative, whatever. And they paint her as worse than that. Her roommate and some other people comment on kind of what her life is. That she's not just a scrappy con artist trying to make her way in the world. That she really sort of fundamentally believes in not earning an honest buck in sort of any way, and kind of only reverts to crime, which makes you dislike her. But I still sympathize with her a little bit.
Well, Ryan has
if I didn't at least a little bit, I mean, then what would be the exercise here at all? So, she gets in over her head in kind of the same way, even though
the movie plays. I think
that's her personality.
And I think the movie really plays upon the idea that we love Ed Robinson's character so much that we think it's that. Well, if those two just get together, she'll be a better person.
Mama, I can change him.
I can change. Yeah. And it feels like he's like
in reverse, I guess.
Yeah. In reverse, that it's
the idea that is so manipulative and she's bumbling.
And she has these moments where she goes from the play acting to whack, and she's something else. And that's when you're watching a movie, those are harsh takes that really, that's sour you on the character, which is what they're supposed to do, of course.
But that's what's at the heart of the film for me is the tone, that it is kind of lighthearted. Yes, they're swindling him. Yes, they're being horrible people, but not to the level of where it goes, which is unbelievable to me.
Yeah,
but it's almost rom-com-y, screwball-y for the first hour and 20 minutes.
Yeah,
and which I appreciated, and it was so very different from, Woman in the Window. So
it's much lighter in tone right from the get-go, and yet it goes to such a much.
It goes way further than Woman in the Window does.
It was weird because I the whole movie I just kept waiting for Edward G. Robinson to break out into The Lady in Red, or to sing Sailing, and he, because I'm like, all this talk of Christopher Cross, and I'm like when is
Christopher Cross for the last goddamn time does not sing The Lady in Red.
Sorry,
Christopher.
Yeah. Sorry, I meant that's what I meant to go with. That's why I tried to just.
Don't make me say it on this show again. I'm telling you.
Ooh.
Anywho,
threats aside.
That is our hero's name though in the movie, and it is kind of weird because whenever there's a subsequent. This happens every once in a while in these stories. There's some subsequent notable person who shows up in the world with that name. You get used to it, but the opening scenes at the banquet you're just like, that's not Christopher Cross.
This one, and this one,
or Chris Cross will make you jump, even though somebody does make that joke at one point.
Yes, they do.
But
he does not wear his clothes backwards, for example, at any point that I'm aware of.
I mean, that's one of the cool, or not cool things, but one of the, I think one of the stronger things about, especially this movie, is where Robinson's willingness to sort of take a back seat and really let Joan Bennett and Dan Duria, just they're the ones just absolutely chewing
it up.
And so him as the straight man, as the foil for all of this. Yeah, it is so. It's and I agree with Ryan that Johnny gets a little much in this one.
I disagree.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying I didn't like it. I'm saying that
no, it's just
I liked the more limited time we spent with him as a man of mystery. I just preferred it slightly. He's brilliant in this. It's a different kind of movie. He really needs to be laying it out in every scene. You know, the movie's got to go through all these steps to get where it's going. So it's not like less of him would be better. It's more less of that sort of broad performance has more power, I think, if you can manage it.
I think, performances all around were amazing. Even the woman playing his wife. And then the ex-husband or the husband that shows up later. I'm like, are you like talking about?
Well, that was the moment
I showed up, and my husband's like, oh my God. And I'm like, what? Who is it? I had no idea.
That moment where you find out he could legitimately get out of his marriage, even if nothing else works out for the guy, you're just like, yes, you hit the jackpot, mate.
There's two observations I have about this film. One is that there are so few films that can change so smoothly tonally. And Something Wide, Demi Picture, which I happen to adore, is one of those films that is seamless. It changes tone in the third act, and it's heart-wrenching. And I found this to be in that same level of brilliance because
or Something Wild, which you turned me on to, is another movie.
That's what I just said. Yeah, Something Wild.
Sorry, I thought you said
no. But it's just something about
that's hard to do.
It is, and the fact that they are able to do it. But I found this. My husband booed this at the end, not because it's a brilliant movie, but this is so mean-spirited. This movie is so mean,
and it is very mean.
Yep. I loved it, but I hurt really bad when this was over. This was so unpleasant.
This goes dark.
In a good way that it affected you that deeply. But no, he didn't boo it because he didn't like it. He booed it because this is.
Well, it has another one of those pre-explanation scenes where it's like you can never get away with murder, and then the end of the film goes on to prove it basically and show you that.
But it drags it out.
Yes.
Because you get to see in the apartment, I'm like, okay, well, this is rough, and then it just keeps going. You're torturing your audience here.
It's a brilliant double feature, Rob. Not just because the successive years and because there's so many similarities, but because the differences in these types of really meaningful things we're talking about are profound. And so nothing about what you've seen, even in the cat and mouse woman in the window, nothing that you've seen really prepares you for where the end of the two movies leaves you, and it makes it all the more heart-wrenching, I think, which is
that's the order we watched it, and we watched it in order of release, and it would have been very difficult if we would have watched Scarlet Street prior.
I agree.
I mean, that would have been a
feature
really
has an order that must be adhered to.
Absolutely. No, I want to thank you, Rob, because I really loved both of these. This was they were amazing. Even with the terrible color of the first one, because you got past it after 10 minutes, you just whatever, you're not focused on it.
You get carried away by the story.
Yep.
Joan Bennett's neck is gray and her face is colorful.
It happens in reverse, as brilliant looking as Fritz's black and white photography is early on, somewhere in the movie you stop caring about any of that and you're just wrapped up in the story, and it works either way, actually.
The great thing about this double feature for me is with very limited Edward G. Robinson exposure, to see two super different performances. I was just blown away. This is so good. I love both of these, but the second one's just difficult.
Yes, it is. And what's interesting about, without spelling out the ending, you said that it proves that you don't ever get away with murder, except in this film, he technically does, and I don't know how they got away with that.
No, he technically does, but he never really does. And that's what the cop is sort of saying.
And I think maybe that's how they got around it, but production code-wise, I don't know how they got around that. How they got to do this.
That's how they showed his... It shattered it.
It's supposed to still have to
He didn't get arrested, but it shattered his soul.
Yeah, and I would say, but he almost, by saying he almost does, the character really is like, Yeah, I did. And then there's this conversation of, well, I don't think anyone ever really gets away with it. And it's this one conversation that he just is like, I did it. Oh my God, I did it. To, oh no. And it's just like, you just see that moment of the string that had been holding all of this together for his character just snap.
Yeah.
And then he just is,
he's so endearing, even though he's just kind of technically a loser. But I kind of was rooting for him. Like that
scene where he goes in to get fired, and his boss who runs the place is like, all he says is it a woman?
Yep.
No,
and he's like, yeah, and that's all he needs to hear. He's like, well, obviously you're gone. We can't keep you here, but I'm not gonna
send you to prison.
Yeah, I'm over a woman, because it's like somewhere deep down, the successful man of the world who owns his own bank or whatever, like he gets it.
That gorgeous final shot of him walking the street and then it fades into a different version of it is.
Yeah.
I was so emotional with this movie. This upset me greatly, but really, really good stuff.
I mean, I prefer The Woman in the Window as a film. That if I have to pick between them, that's my favorite. But this performance or this character of Edward G. Robinson's is my favorite of the two, because I love how he talks about art.
Yeah.
How he has a feeling and draws a line around it. That's what art is to him. And art is always a romance. He has
the
a
art
couple
in it is kind of amazing too, and it has had a life of its own since the film came out, which is really kind of neat.
Oh, really? Like those are one of those things. It's like, where is this artwork, screen used artwork? Where is this now? Because I want some.
It is still around and about, and appreciated actually. So you can. We won't go into the details of
probably
that
somewhere in your town.
Yeah, these two movies, but check if you watch the movie and you check out the artwork. Check out the Wikipedia page or the IMDb page, and the art. It's really neat. The art lived on, right? I mean, doesn't that make you feel good?
It does, because I love that art. Like the first time we see it, that picture of a flower that he's painting.
Yeah.
And his friends comes over and like, where's that flower?
Where's that flower?
Like,
that conversation on the street that he has with the guy selling the street art too is a fantastic scene.
Yep.
It's so loaded with just golden moments, and they're not in the places you would expect necessarily, and that's really neat.
Yep. Yeah. So we got to move on though. So a few weeks ago, sorry, Rob has one more thing he clearly wants to make sure.
There's just a couple other quick things, and I'll run through them. One is, again, the production code. I don't know how they got away with some of this stuff. Obviously, she's sleeping with her boyfriend all the time. He beats her up, and she loves it. It's just, that was for me the first time I saw him. The surprising things about both of these films that you're like, this was 1944.
Yeah, but audiences,
they're doing things that you sort of don't remember that they did.
I did rep theater in Central Kentucky, where the audiences are super conservative, and if you swore, half of them would literally get up and walk out of the theater. So we were constantly editing things and changing things, and it was, to all the artists working there, it was a distasteful idea to even do that. But what you did find was that if you don't swear at them, and you don't, if you just do it in a certain way, the audiences were willing to engage with whatever you put in front of them.
Oh, for cat's sake.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I have a list of them, and I'm not just saying, I don't mean to cut you off, Rob. I'm just saying, they do everything you have to do to not be explicit about that stuff, even though it's all still there. And I think that's how they got away with it.
Yeah.
But I like that that it's all still there, even though it's not. He does get rough with her on screen, but they can handle a little of that. He's the bad guy.
Right. And the last thing is when the film has a trial, and when it gets to it, you see how everything that sort of just happened in the movie comes back into play. And you see the ingenuity of the script when, no, that's not his paintings. He's copying that lady's. Just the way everything's set.
It was smooth.
Yeah. I really like that. So. Okay, that's my piece.
So let's. So a few weeks ago, we took a look at the work of Peter Hyams. I recommend going back and checking out that show because this is a guy who has made some really entertaining. I'm trying to remember the words that you used, Ryan, when describing his work.
I can't remember either.
Yeah,
mainstream entertainment.
He makes good pop films. And you want to talk about emotional roller coaster. The first one here we're going to talk about. We're talking about. So we won't really get into the plots in the movie and all that stuff, but we're going to mostly be reactions
because they're both plot heavy movies, and you really can check out that previous episode. You can't talk about this first one though without getting into the plot a little bit, at least the inciting incident of it.
Right. And so when the first manned flight to Mars is deemed unsafe and scrubbed on the launch pad, anxious authorities must scramble to save face and retain their funding. And so an unthinkable plot to fake the mission is hatched, and that is Capricorn 1.
So it's the cheesiest, corniest, but still very, very involving 70s conspiracy movie. Basically, it's got the craziest conspiracy. It was born out of the idea that the Apollo moon landings were faked, and it's quite a reveal the way the movie gets to this. But it goes off of that idea, and when they find out that the life support system is likely to fail on their little ship to Mars at some point, these guys in suits just show up, pull them off the capsule as it's about to be shot into space, and they get them in a helicopter and they hustle them out into the middle of the desert where there's this whole studio set up in this big warehouse, and for months they pretend to be on Mars, broadcasting back to the rest of the world. They are lying to their families. Nobody knows about this. And as I'll just say it real quick before we get into individual reactions, at least to the premise, that the astronauts are played by James Brolin, Sam Waterston, and O.J. Simpson. And the guy, the G-man who's sort of the liaison for NASA, is played by Hal Holbrook. And Hal Holbrook's, we talked on the Hyams show about the difference between a movie that Hyams directs, because he's his own cinematographer, he's largely his own editor, he's his own director, and on these early films, on both the ones we're about to talk about, he's the screenwriter as well. And a movie that Hyams writes has this very unique movie speak personality to it, none of his other films compared to this one rise to the level of this, where everybody's got this style of talking to one another. And Hal Holbrook, and I really think there's great moments in this with Karen Black and with Brenda Blevin in particular, where
Vaccaro.
There's and Bosley from Charlie's Angels. They're all speaking like some part of Peter's psyche basically to each other, and that's really, really, or part of his fantasy of being a movie character psyche, we'll say. Yep. And but the best ever is Hal Holbrook's long ass winding monologue where he's revealing little teeny bits of what's going on to these astronauts who are sitting in this antiseptic conference room in the middle of the desert.
Yeah.
When moments ago they were thinking they were going to Mars, and it's absurd and kind of wonderful and poetic in a way.
The moment he sits down, they're like, what the hell's going on? Blah blah blah, and he just goes, first, now we've known each other a long time. And you're like, years. Strap in, because he's going on a journey here. It's genius, and they go through this, and of course, just get to where the movie really starts is where something else goes wrong, and suddenly it's a foot chase to freedom, because the conspiracy hounds come at our heroes from basically every direction, and that's really what the movie is. Chase movie.
I know that this is the one out of the 6 movies that I obviously my 2 movies, but I had seen this before, and I went and looked back in my Facebook, and I watched it 13 years ago. I remembered maybe 1% of the film. I don't know where or why it data dumped, but this was a whole brand new experience for me. I remembered basically how it ended. I remembered that, and maybe some little trinkets of visuals, but I had no clue what was going on. I'm like, I apparently have reached that age, but I flippin' loved this again. I remember liking it back in the day, but it was so much fun. I wanted to specifically talk about the dialogue because it is so snappy. And it made me happy, specifically, like you said, the Karen Black, Elliot Gould scenes, and the David Doyle scene. You know, all of that just made me so happy. The action and stuff was all great. I mean, the plane chase with Savalas, which he was an amazing character.
To have him come in where he came in.
Joel, Joel, what is the name of Elliot Gould's character in it?
Robert Caulfield.
He comes in their conversation when he's trying to rent this crop dusting biplane to make his escape. That's what he says. He goes, "Sir, my name is Robert Caulfield," and Savalas, without a breath, is, "Well, I can't help that."
Yep. But all of it's so good, and so then to have on this opposite end, like that whole sequence is hard. It's crazy, the whole plane sequence, and I'm like, how did they film this? It's so great, but all of it was just a really joyful ride, and weird little touches like those communicating helicopter. I'm like, that's crazy.
The helicopters that they would look at each other. I was just like,
what is going on?
That made me so happy.
I like you kind of mentioned
for fans of old school aerial sequences. This film we talked about in the Peter Hyams episode was produced by Lord Grade and ITC Films, and it was an independent film. Essentially, it was a big budget mainstream independent film, but it was basically a 70s indie. So the breaks are out on the Mustang sequence was in like 12 different TV shows. The footage of the planes and stuff was in Fall Guy and was in just all these different things. They licensed out this footage to make every nickel they could out of the thing. Whereas if it was a Paramount property or something, it probably would not have been treated that way. It's always one of the first films. Every time there's a new format, it was one of the first Blu-rays to come out. It was one of the first DVDs to come out because it's a popular movie that they'll just sell you the rights for nothing for. So it's always appears very, very quickly. And I don't know what I'm saying with that, but it's kind of funny that it's that kind of movie, even though it was a big hit in its day.
It's a great cast too. As we were watching the opening credits, I'm like,
every bit player in it, man. Who's the guy who plays the senator at the beginning, who played Santa in the Santa Claus movie?
Yeah, David Huddleston.
That David Huddleston scene with that little intern with the binoculars. I mean, that stuff is choice.
Well, one of the wives, the wife of Sam Waterston, is the woman from Airplane. That's funny. Jim never has the second cup of coffee at home. I don't know the actress's name, but everyone is recognizable in there. Everybody.
And Sam Waterston.
He was
when
great.
James Brolin says, "We're dead," and he goes, "Oh, and I was such a terrific guy." Sam Waterston's such a self-serious dude, and where he's got wit, but just to see him playing the class clown in this film is so delightful. He's so good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Real quick, my favorite moments are where anytime Elliot Gould's character was interviewing Brenda Vaccaro, the way that those scenes were structured, where she essentially answers the question before he asks it.
Yes.
It was so. I mean, we've seen
his as a character, his willingness to play along with that, and even though she's a grieving widow, and there's this sort of tiptoeing going on there as well. Pretty neat.
My only complaint, there's one thing that bothered me, is that we established the necklace, Brolin's necklace, as they're getting the hinge off the door.
Yep.
And then the next time we see it, Gould finds it in the dust of the thing. It's like, wouldn't it have been better to have us see that fall somewhere? It was really weird to me. It was a weird little that didn't.
Well, and the conspiracy's absurd. Like when they get rid of his NASA technician friend, clear out his apartment and maybe he went away. Leave some mystery. Don't just pretend like the person never existed. That's any basic psychology shows you that'll send you into a tizzy. That would make a person more obsessed as opposed to less or more confused. Yeah. So stuff like that is like, it's fun, but that doesn't make any sense.
And also they made such a big deal with the fact that it's 21 minutes. We can't communicate with them 21 minutes, and yet they have the whole scene with the husbands and the wives talking, and they're like, boy, it doesn't seem like you're even very far away. They're talking like we're talking now.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's like, no one's picking up on that it should take 21 minutes for any sort of response to. No, we're just gonna go, okay, that's fine, all right.
Vaccaro's reaction in that scene to the Yosemite line is gold.
I love Brenda Vaccaro in this film. I used the wrong name, sorry, different Brenda early in the show, but I love her in this movie. It's one of my favorite performances of hers, and she's a very good actor in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But she really gets it. Amongst the boys, Joel's example is the perfect one, where her and Gould's way of interacting is just so it's showy, but it has to be more than that, or the movie doesn't work. She plays it as a woman who's protecting herself from the harsh reality of what's going on, and that makes it deeper and makes it work. And Gould, even though he loves the cleverness of it, also is trying really hard to be very sensitive to this woman, because he's quite certain she has nothing to do with any of this.
Well, two more things I'll point out is, like, I think this is also a weird tone mismatch. Like, it works. Sure. I enjoy it, but it's like,
it's not involving in an intense way, even with the body count and the things that are going on. There are punchlines and things, and there's things constantly throughout the film that's taking the pressure off of you as an audience.
Here's the question for you guys. I want to get your insights. I don't know if it's ever 100% explained, but Simpson and Waterston, they're dead, right?
Yeah. That's how I took it.
My other thing I want to point out is that
spoiler alert for Capricorn 1.
Whatever, but it's the fact that this is very Barbra Streisand heavy. You want to know why? Her ex-husband, I do know why. Her best friend, Brenda Vaccaro, and her current husband, James Brolin, are all.
We thought there's a review I read somewhere from somebody saying that the slow motion running of the two husbands at the end was like some sort of Barbra Streisand nightmare.
that was terrible.
Oh, that's the one thing I was going to say, is that's the one thing that bothered me the most. I picked up on the logic issues in there too and stuff, but you sort of let that go because it's a really engaging movie and
like the
clever in a lot of ways.
I didn't like him either, but that's why I
slow-mo.
That's why I loved it, because it is so ridiculous, and you really have just sat through a ridiculous film.
Gould is smiling. Why is he smiling?
Because it's weird. Because they did the wrong take. The whole concept of that ending is awful. But
how could they show up there?
The president's there. They can't just show up.
Yeah, they can't just come.
To me, it's perfect, because it's not the end of something else. It's the end of Capricorn 1, and it's exactly what it's supposed to be, basically.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
All right.
You're not wrong. It's awful, but it's really awful.
So let's pair this one up. Ryan, why don't you introduce us to the movie you paired this up with?
Well, Outland, Capricorn 1 I find really entertaining, and I do watch it a lot, but Outland I loved when I was a kid. It's something about the way it's designed and stuff, and Outland's one of those movies where I first watched it on a crap VHS tape, and then I bought a non-anamorphic, speckled to an inch of its life DVD when it first came out. And then a few years back, I guess it's 10 plus years now, but they restored it, which wasn't hard to do. They had the elements. They just restored it and put it up there. And suddenly the visualness of it and the design aspects of it, like all that stuff, which is, again, it's a plot heavy movie. So you don't have to dwell on any of that, but that makes you realize that this cheesy B movie, High Noon in space thing actually had a ton of artistic merit to how it was done, particularly from an effects and design standpoint. It certainly has. Peter Hyams wrote it. It's got plenty of cheesy dialogue, just like our previous film. It's got the same sort of flamboyant characters and stuff. Peter Boyle as the bad guy, I love him. We talked, Joel, this movie, Hyams this movie was made from a design aspect and from the studio aspect by all the same people who made Alien, and it's always been Alien's like dirty stepson, sort of. It kind of takes place in the same universe. It's the same kind of evil companies, same kind of spacesuits, same kind of logos, and it's the same big lockers with big stenciled numbers on them. Like, just it's got all this.
The opening credits are straight out of Alien.
The music sounds like Alien. It's by the same composers.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is it a ripoff though? No, it's a kind of obviously a totally different kind of movie, but it definitely wants to be the next Alien. You feel that coming from it. It takes a little time, in fact, I think, when you're seeing it for the first time to get over that, if you're a person who's seen Alien many, many times. But once it gets rolling, it's another basically conspiracy movie where they're out on Io, one of the moons of Jupiter, and they're mining for what is it, unobtainium, Joel? I can't remember.
It's pretty much unobtainium.
Pretty much. Yeah. So they're mining on this moon, and it's the space station with all this deep grooves and airlocks and stuff. But what's cool about it is it's like Alien. It's a very dirty working class sort of truck stop looking place that they all live in. And the film is a Western. It really is a Western where the new sheriff comes to town, doesn't like the big ranchers' way of doing things, discovers a crime, and for whatever reason, this time he will not back down, played by Sean Connery. Sean Connery loves this movie, partly because it happened at a time in his career where, they weren't offering him stuff like this. And he loves Peter Hyams, who worked with him again in a future film as a result. Kind of when he got big and famous, he kind of returned the favor, basically. He was already big and famous, but too famous for his own good in the late 70s and early 80s to a certain degree. He's great in it. He plays an interesting guy with a lot of integrity. He doesn't have a lot of dialogue to show it. Said Peter Hyams' good luck charm is the actor James B. Sicking. I think he's fantastic in this. Which
character is he?
He's the deputy who tries to make him feel better about his wife leaving him. God, the woman who plays his wife is terrible.
No, the kid is terrible.
But the kid is terrible, but terrible kids are a dime a dozen. I can look the other way on that. That kid does not embrace the corniness of Peter Hyams' dialogue, but how could he? She annoys me. I don't know. She leaves this video Dear John letter to him when she leaves him, and it makes me hate her. So in a way that I didn't even hate the chick in Scarlet Street. So I really want to like people. It's just so.
I didn't have that reaction at all.
Just say it. You liked her.
It didn't bother me. I was kind of indifferent, but
Connery helps because he sells the reality of it. He obviously loves his wife and is heartbroken by this, even though he plays it very stoically, like a movie star should. It affects him, and it continues to affect him throughout the movie, which is kind of awesome. But basically what's happening is there's this drug scam going on where they're bringing these barbiturates or whatever on board, and they're making these guys work harder and play harder and stuff. And it's increasing the productivity of this outpost exponentially, but also every once in a while, it makes you go completely psychotically insane.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. And that leads me to the last thing I'll say before I let you guys have some reactions. I'm sorry. I really, really like Outland. But my favorite part about Outland, without question, is Frances Sternhagen.
Yeah.
My God in heaven. I love her so much in this. That part was written for Sam Waterston, and I don't know how they came around to Frances. I just adore her in it. She's this old. She's not even that old, but she's always had an old soul. And even as a relatively young woman in this film, she just feels like an old grizzled lady, just yapping at you and snapping at you.
I would say
favorite moments. Go ahead, Joel.
I was just gonna say that to me that's the same energy that Sam Waterston always has. Waterston has always had like this older, crackling, the sassy grandpa.
Right, it's the old dock in the old West town, right?
And so
it was written for Sam Waterston, but the fact that they brought Frances in,
was
already one of my favorite actors, and that she just sort of nails it. her thing she says to him when he's making her do the research on how many deaths there have been recently, and she's like, and you want to know how many in the months before that? He's like, how many? And she's like, 2. And he's like, really? She's like, yes, really. I'm unpleasant. I'm not stupid. I can count. I mean, A+ line, written line, reading, everything about it is perfect. And their relationship to me is where the fun Peter Hyams stuff is happening. So I really love Outland for that reason. And, you know, they sick the assassins on him and he's got to fight them off at the end. And it's like a big Western shootout, except in this high-tech atmosphere. And I just think it's a very cool movie. Go ahead, Michael.
This was my first time screening. I'd seen the video cover in the stores for the past 40 years, and it just always looked intriguing to me, but
somehow never found its way home.
It just never made its way. And
you always grabbed big business instead.
That's right. What's the term out here in Hollywood? I have notes. So I didn't dislike it, but I had a lot of problems. And to start with Sternhagen, which I love her too, and I loved her performance, but I'm like, this character is so tired. Like I feel like we've seen this at least 3,000 times. I'm like, yeah, she's great. She delivered the lines great. I liked her, but you know, as far as the Alien stuff, it did feel like a cheaper version of Alien. None of the sets, even though visually they look cool, none of them had weight. I don't know if you guys saw that. It all felt,
especially their living quarters and stuff. There is a little sense that
because the Nostromo looks heavy. It feels heavy.
This film could not afford that level of art direction because it needed so many more sets.
Well, it didn't help that they were running across the things every 5 seconds. There was something about it that just I couldn't buy into it. It just all looked too light to me. And even
artificial.
Some of the dirtiness on the walls, it's like that's clearly painted on there to make it look dirty. So that kind of was a bothersome thing for me that was distracting. I thought character-wise overall, his thing in the racquetball court describing why he was there, I'm like, I can't buy any of this. You love your wife, go with her, go with your child. It was kind of no more than I need to do this.
That's a good point.
Oh, I totally buy that. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
No,
you need to. I was going into the assumption that you wanted to.
I get it. I understand why. I mean, basically, some nameless company that I don't like is saying that I would be sent here as opposed to a better station. Well, I got to prove them wrong at the expense of my family. I'm like, no.
The film, although Boyle as a smooth-talking, really low-energy villain, which is kind of fun, he does goad him at every turn into fighting back. And he is an old-timey sheriff, and he's going to fight back. But you're not wrong. If the film's going to make the effort to ask you why, you've got to have a better reason than I'm just sick of this shit. I'm kind of with you on that. That's fair.
It was
criticism.
Too much for me to be, and honestly, the opening sequence kind of set me up for failure. Literally, there corny. Are 5 minutes of titles. I'm like, come on.
5 minutes
from
of titles.
Jupiter. How many crew and where did the crew come from? And like these titles, and it went on for 5 minutes.
Not the titles.
I'm like, this is
the information scroll or whatever
this is
that you're talking about.
Storytelling. That's lazy. And so that bothered me right from the outset. I'm like,
you'd rather have lots of exposition amongst the workers.
Well, you could work it in better ways, but that.
Well, they do have a big conversation right at the beginning of the film between the workers where there could have been some exposition. Instead, it's all just yippy yappy.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, that's my first impression of your film.
Yeah.
You're being lazy, and that's what I'm going to take in with me as I continue on. Even though there are good things, like the chase sequence through the barracks.
The foot chase is great. Yeah, really cool.
Like amazing. But it's like everything else for me, it's like, and I didn't hate it. I was entertained, but there were too many things for me to be like, no. So I'm sorry, Ryan, I didn't love your movie. No. That's all I'll say. That's it.
So, okay, here's
you really needed to have rented it in 1984 and probably not be watching it now.
Yeah. I had never seen Capricorn 1, so that was a first view for me. The Outland I had seen back in the day as well and really liked it. And watching it this time, that helped inform my opinion. I still really enjoy it, but I saw more of those things. That opening sequence with the guys out there and the guy going crazy, it was too long. His coworkers were too dense.
Yeah.
It's just like,
quit messing around. I'm like, how many times are you going to say that?
Turn and look at him, for Christ's sake.
That guy, Maurice, it's played by Scottish actor Maurice Roves, by the way, the guy who goes insane at the beginning. And
I thought he really popped. He must have been off the screen.
He must have been the practical joker of the crew, because they really, really are reluctant to admit.
I know, but there comes that point in reality and logic where, as an audience member, I'm like, okay, at what point would you not just turn and address this?
Yeah.
I mean, they literally say, quit messing around like 10 times. I'm like, come on.
That's totally fair. Yeah. Although I do like the sequence where the guy just, with a smile on his face, just wanders outside.
That was handled much better. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
because
of course,
everyone was busy and
the great Stephen Burkhoff losing it with a prostitute was pretty entertaining as well, although that was a little over the top. But his Stephen Burkhoff, if you need somebody to go nuts and be turned up to 12 in a film, I mean, he's your guy. And he his little, "You're gonna kill me," that line. It's like, I'm not doing it justice. Stephen was born to do that.
This made me think of Alien 3 tonally. Like the way the sense of all these men kind of, they weren't workers in Alien 3, but the whole idea made me think of that.
The other thing for me in this one was the end. I was starting to get frustrated with Sean Connery for wasting all of this time getting drunk. They're going to be here in 48 hours or whatever.
That happens
Start planning right away.
That happens in High Noon, so
that's
why it's
there. It's handled better in High Noon.
It is.
This one is just sort of like, they're coming. They're going to kill you, so be prepared.
I had the same reaction, Rob.
At his sort of ambush plan and stuff, and him being more proactive in those moments would be better.
Well,
you have that, and then you have the very famous scene where he goes in, he's like it's literally word for word out of High Noon. I could use a little help. I mean, that's the word. Yeah. That's the words exactly.
Yeah.
But I have the same problem, Rob, is that the fact that there's something about getting this close to the climax and we're just jumping ahead 10 hours to show that the shuttle's 10 hours are coming. It's like you go from what has been going. I want to know what's been happening in these 10 hours. That was just kind of a misstep to me. Like, why? I mean, I know we can't fill in 10 hours worth of information.
No, but you're not wrong. Like, something productive.
So was he sitting in his place picking his nose?
Clearly he was setting up his plan for how he was getting to know the place, because those foot chases aren't random. He lures people into certain situations. You can tell that the big final action sequence, like, things don't always go according to plan, but he was planning out how he was going to try and fight off these guys. And we didn't need to see all of that to the point that it was telegraphing everything, but some hints of it would have had a better payoff. And I think that's what's missing in that little, those lost 10 hours that you're talking about.
For a smart guy, he wasn't using his time wisely.
Right.
And then
or if he was, the film was choosing not to share it with us.
Yeah. When they're outside, there was just something this time about that, like that fight and chase sequence when they're outside of the station in their suits. Mm-hmm. It just didn't feel like it worked right. I mean, it wasn't terrible, but there was just something off about it. I couldn't quite put my finger on it.
You guys have to remember all the crap movies that you watched. This was a really good crap movie.
Yeah.
No,
that's true.
What they're trying to pull off from an effects standpoint and a reality, but they're not. It feels like you're in a sound studio, but I've watched every stupid sci-fi movie throughout the years. And
you've seen much worse, right?
I mean, like 100 much worse moments and movies. This is one of the good ones. It's not perfect. You can see the seams and you can feel the wires, but I hate to besmirch that stuff, because that's really as well done as they could have done back then.
No, I mean, I enjoyed it. I will never probably watch this again, but this has been something I've wanted to see for 40 years. So I'm just glad I finally saw it. I'm kind of bummed that I didn't like it very much, but I mean, I'm richer for it. There's a lot of interesting things. I mean, Goldsmith ripped off every one of his prior, and I mean, Poltergeist was pulled straight from this score. You know, it was interesting to see all those things and to see where this fell in the release time and kind of with all these different actors and the characters and all the artists. And here's my other quick question. Is Peter Yates the one that directed Kroll?
Yes.
Okay, because I have gotten these two Peters mixed up.
But Peter Yates, well, they're very similar. And Peter Yates is not a Kroll type of director. He was a fish out of water directing that. He directed Eyewitness, and he directed what's the heist movie with Redford and all those guys, Rob, that he did in the 70s? Where they're trying to.
Is it The Hot Rock? Yeah,
The Hot Rock. So he's a Hyams-like director. He's a very workman-like. You know, he's got a lot of talent, but he makes these sort of pop entertainments. But Kroll, which I love, it's a much worse movie than Outland, though, just on its merits. It's far stupider, and every choice they make is terrible.
Yeah. I gotta say, I really still like Outland. And I think it helps having seen it earlier. And I love Francis Sternhagen.
Same with Kroll. I watch Kroll once a year because some part of me loves it, but not the part that really enjoys good, well thought out cinema.
I understand the nostalgia factor. I mean, I get that because a lot of my movies that I love, they're crap, but because I saw them at a young age and they had some sort of influence and impact.
Sure.
So I agree with you. Had I seen this in the 80s, I'd probably be like, Outland. But, now I'm a bitter old bitch. So
still, that's
Fresh Eyes did
that's
show
still
me
a fair, honest
flaws
reaction to what you're seeing, no doubt. Joel, you want to give Outland a big thumbs up at the end to send us off into the next?
Oh well, I mean, Outland is Outland. I mean, we talked about it. We talked about it a few weeks ago. You know, it's fine. Do I love it? No. Is it fun in a lot of ways? Yeah. It's good crap. It's so, I mean, that's kind of, I know that's not like, seller praise, but I kind of agree with literally everything everyone is saying on this. It has its problems, yet it's also really, it's also really fun, and it's got a lot of fun things going for it. A movie that has absolutely no plot holes is exceptionally well done, and also came out in the same year. It's my first movie of our double feature, and that would be John Huston's Escape to Victory, or as we call it here in the U.S., Victory.
Can I say one thing about Victory? Victory has a poster where they're doing this, basically the goal, but it's if it were two guys, thank you. I could almost handle it, but it's three, which makes it feel like they're cheerleaders doing like a little pose or something. I always wished there in that picture that Max von Sydow was like photobombing it from the side. And when I had that thought, I can never look at that without seeing him going, "Hello, I'm over here."
Or it would have been a bold choice if it was the three Allied players, going Victory, and then Max von Sydow doing the Hitler salute as the other branch of the V.
We're seeing both sides. Yeah,
bold choice.
It's a very cool moment in the film when they're playing the German national anthem and the SS guys are all giving the Hitler salute and the Wehrmacht are not. They're saluting normally.
Yeah.
I wondered why that was.
Because in 1944 the Wehrmacht were not required to do the Hitler thing. They were eventually at some point that year.
Okay.
But they weren't
because of this
insisted
game.
upon and so they didn't. And it's even though there was a lot of pressure on them to do so, they didn't. And I think that's kind of neat.
Look, just real quick I know most of our listeners
passes without explanation, like you say. But
most of our listeners are very familiar with this movie, so I probably don't need to give a plot description, but I will, just in case there's one or two listeners of the podcast who aren't familiar with Victory. It has to do with it takes place World War II. Allied POW camp. They're preparing. A Nazi colonel comes up with an idea of, hey, maybe he sees some prisoners of war kicking a ball around. He's like, and he recognizes Michael Caine's character as a former England international, and says, hey, maybe we should have a game between a bunch of POWs and some Germans. And then, of course, and they're like, oh, yeah, I mean, I guess it's fine. And then it just spirals out of control. It becomes this giant propaganda thing for the Nazis. They're going to hold it in Cologne Stadium, in Nazi-occupied Paris. And then the prisoners of war see it with the help of Canadian soldier Sylvester Stallone, that this is an opportunity to stage an escape. And so the French resistance and British officers are planning the escape of all of these POWs during this soccer match.
Directed by all-time great director John Huston.
John Huston, starring Michael Caine, Sylvester Stallone, and a whole host of amazing soccer players.
Headlined by the great Pele, who Michael Caine thought this movie was stupid, but he did it just to be with, Stallone did it to work with John Huston because he thought he was the best actor ever. Here's an all-time great director. But I love that Michael Caine did it just to be around Pele.
Called his old friend, Michael Caine called his old buddy Bobby Moore, who's who at one point was the captain of the England national team when they won the World Cup in 1966 against Germany. And then it just turned into other players calling their buddies. And then one of the top English teams at the time, Ipswich Town, was given Sir Bobby Moore, the manager of Ipswich Town, said, hey, they're filming this soccer movie over in Hungary, and I've given permission if any of you guys want to go be in this film. They need some soccer players. And everyone just thought, oh, they'll be in the background kicking a ball around. But nope, then it was like day one, they show up and they're like, here, soccer player Mike Summerby, you're playing Sid, go. And they're like, oh, so he suddenly these guys with no experience. I don't think it shows. I think that these footballers clearly take to acting. Really, I think they're delivering some amazing performances. And
they're not asked to do a whole lot outside of the soccer, thankfully.
Yeah. So
there is a weird montage where a bunch of them all get to do their signature moves in slow motion.
Yeah. Well, it's very there's some obviously I love this movie because as a young American playing soccer, I had no outlet. I had no, knowledge of soccer beyond the Minnesota Kicks and the Minnesota Strikers indoor team. We didn't have the internet, so there was no following, Manchester United or Bayern Munich or Real Madrid.
Right. We weren't connected to Europe the way Europe was connected to each other at all at the time. So to get,
and of course we all knew Pele. That was pretty much it. We knew Pele. And
Pele was at least from our hemisphere.
Yeah. And he came in, and when he came to play in the United States, it was the Beatles. It was a giant deal for him to come in, and he does have this really he did all the talk shows, and he has this wonderful bubbly personality, and so that was what we knew. So getting to see these and to know that these were great professional players playing this, it became such a huge impactful marriage of I love movies and I love soccer, and here we get to watch it. I didn't even know at the time. Literally, this film it captures the sport of soccer better than any other soccer film has ever been able to do.
And there's no Johnny the Explainer announcer during the soccer scenes.
Correct.
This really makes it unique, maybe not amongst World War II films, but amongst sports movies.
Yeah.
Where you are always given a guy who is telling you the significance of every single visual thing that you were happening in each sports climax.
Yep.
this film just stubbornly, it got a teeny bit of that, but it stubbornly doesn't do that. It shows you soccer play out in front of your eyes, and you're left to figure out yourself. Before we react,
the only clue you get to that is Max von Sydow's character, his reaction, and his, as someone who his character had, played briefly with the German national team and clearly loves this sport beyond anything going on in the war.
Right.
And he's just watching these players, sometimes he's watching the German players with just like, yeah, that's my team.
He's watching a great match.
And then he's watching a great match.
Wrapped up in it.
Yeah. And so you see that, and that's one of the great things I loved about that. Like you said, Ryan, it's stunning. It doesn't rely on any gimmick.
It's a testament to John Huston. When he's left alone with visual storytelling, this thing really sings. It's a tale of two movies to a certain degree, though. This is based on a real incident. And the incident is not the overblown, let's go to Paris and play a massive match in front of a sold-out stadium story. But it really is the story of this prison camp thing, and the thing did sort of get out of hand. And the decision, both films feature a really interesting decision at the climax of the thing. Basically, I'm not going to say the one that happens in the movie, but it's different than the one that happened in real life. In real life, the decision was, we could win. Do we go out there and win? And a bunch of us, at least the ringleaders, will no doubt be executed. Or do we just throw the match, let them have their way, but wink at them so that they know that we could have won and keep our lives? And they chose the former. And that's why this moment has this sort of legend. And that's the story that the original screenwriter was trying to tell. And he was overwritten and in not a great way. Although I think the movie's really good. And every time I watch it, I'm like, there's so much great stuff in this that I get a little bit wrapped up in it every time, even though plot wise, it really doesn't move along at a very good clip the way a movie they would be forced to today. But I sort of like that because, like I said, I like the quiet moments. I like the shots of a train moving, and I like the shots that he gets like along the fence. I think the design is great. That stadium that they found in Hungary without any lights and stuff in the 80s where the big finale happens is amazing. You really feel transported back in time and on a huge scale, which I think has tons of value. But I wish it didn't have a crowd pleasing rewrite that sort of really kind of took the soul of what the thing was out of it in favor of they still have to make a choice. So that's still there and it's still in the same spot, but that choice doesn't have the weight of consequence or the weight of war to it. The way
or believability.
Yeah. Well, that's another one. Your ability to buy into that or not kind of does affect how you leave the theater at the end of this movie.
Well, this was a first time screening for me and I didn't care for it. And I felt bad because I know that, Joel, this is one of your favorite movies, but I really had a lot of problems with this. The main overriding problem for me is how non-seriously they took this era and this situation. This movie didn't give that any reverence, and that was really, frankly, distasteful to me. Like,
I wouldn't say any, but it definitely undermined itself to be a crowd-pleasing sports film.
The most powerful moment is when those Eastern European players show up. Geez, that was, and then it's glossed over immediately, and we have no further insight.
Right.
And I'm like, I found it tacky. I'm like, this is not cool. Conti's score didn't help things. It's an awful, awful score. Like,
he only knows how to write the Rumpty-Tum heroic theme. He doesn't handle the subtleties of the movie very well.
It didn't help things. I mean, I think the term I used was like, it all feels bombastic, and there was no characters that I cared for. I mean, I really, really didn't care for this. And talking about the final choice, I'm like, that's where I checked out. I'm like, no, this is absolutely absurd. And in my mind, I'm looking at it from the realistic perspective of, what about these Frenchmen that have just risked their lives to handle this? oh, but we're going to go up and play the second.
We can win. We can win, Colby.
Be kidding me.
They couldn't.
I mean,
win.
it was absurd. It was absurd.
And you know what? They didn't win.
Yeah.
They didn't. It was a draw.
No, I
that's a win.
Really didn't like this at all.
I mean, that's a kind of win.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that bothered me too is, I think you mentioned the pacing. I'm like, there was no urgency of any kind ever in this entire film.
No,
even
given the amount of
escape,
stuff that they skipped in what they would have had to do to prepare for this event, it still moved glacially slow, especially.
And the only female character introduced is to introduce the fact that Stallone's character is heterosexual. That's the reason she existed. What was the point of her?
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing. I'm like, is there going to be a little romance?
It is very much, again, it's in the rewrite. It's very much, this movie needs a woman, or a star needs to be around a woman. I think the woman herself, that French actress, she's quite good in it. But the whole section is like, what is this doing here? How's he roaming around free in France anyway? Just to get to where we have these scenes is so convoluted and difficult. That's my least favorite part of the film.
Yeah, and that was Stallone flexing his star power. Yeah. I mean, he lobbied John Huston. He was like, I should score the winning goal, right? And they're like, you're the goalkeeper
to do it.
Yeah, he's like, you're the keeper. No, and so the saving of the penalty kick was the compromise. Was the compromise. No, and Michael, please don't ever feel like you're going to be offended. I know this isn't a great movie. To me, what is great about it is it does really capture the sport of soccer better than any other film. And it's a testament to Huston capturing it. And it's also a testament to Huston, he had all these ideas and frankly, it was everyone's reverence towards Pele and Bobby Moore. They said, just show up with the cameras. We got this. And it was Pele, and mostly Pele. Pele's credited with choreographing the soccer. But it was a lot of Bobby Moore and Pele going, let's do this. And that's why almost all of the goals, not that this matters to anybody, almost everything is Bobby Moore. The ball gets out to Bobby Moore passes it, and then the big thing happens and there's a goal, whether it's for every single goal. And it was all because that's how they staged it. They staged all of this stuff to make it seem as much like a real match. And to me, that's really effective.
That's the thing. I actually said that when we were done watching. I'm like, how did they choreograph and collect all this footage? I mean, I don't know soccer. I don't know anything about it, but it's like the fact that it looks so legitimate to me. I'm like, how do you choreograph to get these exact things that you need?
You let the soccer players do it
with how many ever players on each side. Right. I thought that was actually very impressive.
Very.
The terrible zoom ins to Von Sito's reacting, that's another matter. But anyway. No.
He was so happy. He was such a happy Nazi watching this game.
Look, when I saw this back when I was 12, again, it is with those lenses that the nuance of that character was surprising and made an impression on me in a way where when you watch it now, it is the same with Francis as the doctor in Outland. In the early 80s, it was not the cliche that it is now. It was still a cliche. But it was not, and it was certainly less of a cliche that it was a woman and not a guy. Yeah. And that's my reaction to Von Sydow. I with Joel in that I really got into his getting into the match. It helped.
No, I
wasn't
me get talking about the character. I'm talking about the camera movements.
The camera movements, the long distance lens pushing in. We just happened to find this guy in the crowd. Let's let Rob talk.
Okay. So I can't argue with anything Michael said. I like the movie, but I like it for the soccer. You're right on every count.
I'm here for the soccer, baby.
Their decision at the end. First, they couldn't win. They were getting trounced all over because the refs weren't on their side.
They're down 4-1. Yeah. They're down 4-1. We can win this.
Not possible. I mean,
why did they even think that at the time?
Yeah, they scored a goal at the very end of the half.
Right.
And I'm like,
oh, now we can.
Plus, isn't it three? What isn't it? 3 periods and not halves?
No, it's 2 halves.
2 halves.
2 halves.
Okay, so it's not like hockey. Yeah. It's 2 halves.
Thank
you, soccer people.
I had seen this years ago, and I hadn't seen it again since I'd become more of a diehard soccer fan, and I just loved watching them play. The tackles, I can't believe how big a part tackling played. Because we don't see that nearly as much now.
No.
They're sliding like every time somebody gets a ball, somebody's sliding into.
And there weren't any drama queens either pretending to be hurt. I found that refreshing.
Yes, yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
it's
so
just
fun.
To compare it to modern soccer, I really don't.
Right.
And you know what? Every time they called the penalty kick, those were penalties.
Yeah. Thank
you.
So
you want to like, the referee was bought off, and they make that clear. Yeah. But those penalties were legit penalties.
But I hated that Pele is taken out in the first half. Like, no, I want keep him on the field.
And they did that because the thought was Pele's so good, no one is going to buy that he's not just scoring a goal every single time.
Slow motion bicycle kick.
Yeah, so we had to get him off the and also Pele stepped off the pitch so he could choreograph everything else.
Sure. And without him, that's when they're going to win. Now we can go out and win because Pele's off.
Pele's off injured. Our superstar player, and
now I think we can win.
Like, hey guys, we can win this. We can win this. We scored
Yeah, this film has the potential to be great because there's a great true story that if they'd have told that, you'd really, really had something. You certainly have a good director, good production design, decent budget, everything you would want. Mm-hmm. It's insistence on making it World War II soccer Rocky with the music.
Yeah. This is something because this is so beloved this is a beloved sort of movie because of, even despite its badness, it's one of those movies that it's like, it's a holiday film. They play this like how TBS plays A Christmas Story on a loop for 24 hours during Christmas. There's usually somewhere in England that they're playing this on a loop for 24 hours over the Christmas holiday. So because of that, there's always been talk.
It's an old favorite, so tune in when you get a chance.
And there's always been talk of let's redo this. Let's make this movie again with modern players and tell that story again and see if we can capture.
I think it is remake worthy, but it's like you have to have some reverence for the subject matter.
But the storytelling, the scripting in particular, needs to be more. It has to have more integrity to it.
I mean, the fact that they're like, let's go out and play when there are people being murdered, it all just felt so gross to me. It was gross.
The 4 team captains of the team that played in that match were executed at the end of it.
Yeah.
Two final thoughts.
For clearly trying to win.
Two final thoughts from me.
That's an ending to a movie that would leave you breathless, I think. And it just ain't here. That's just not this movie. But what's here is, I find it at least fairly enjoyable, even though I sat here and I'm like, I'm going to really pay attention to Victory this time. And I did still lose myself in the middle hour a few times where I just like, should I go back and watch the kitchen scene? I'm like, nah, F it. I'm just not gonna.
Yep.
I think the casting of Michael Caine was a mistake. Michael Caine's a good actor, but he is not believable as a member of the soccer team.
Yeah, he didn't think he was, man. They drove a boatload of money up into his door and said the Pele was going to be in the movie.
Yeah.
He's 47, and he's an old 47 in the movie. He doesn't look like he could possibly be doing any of the stuff in that film. And he didn't think so, but at that point, he didn't see himself as the character actor that he'd become yet. He still saw himself as a leading man, and he had to kind of take what they offered.
Right.
Which ended right around Hannah and her sisters and good old Jaws 4, The Revenge.
Right.
Where he finally was like, I'm not doing this for the money anymore.
My final thought is John Huston. Clearly, he's losing his skill set a bit here because he was a great director. His first film, The Maltese Falcon, is a fantastic film. He's made lots of great films through the years, and the pacing is just non-existent.
Yeah. African Queen's pretty slow-paced film too.
But that's a great film. That holds up.
I'm not saying it isn't. I'm saying he's an old-fashioned filmmaker and was an old man when he made this, and its pacing alone isn't what undermines it. It's that the pacing is slow because of all this dumb, superfluous crap that's thrown into the film that he didn't really have much control over, honestly.
Right, and so I think it's
a really well shot and lit movie and designed movie for that matter. It's really good visual storytelling when it needs to be. So
and
still got that.
And the logical next step for John Huston, the logical follow-up to a World War II soccer movie, is of course the family musical Annie. And which he did the very next year.
Yeah.
And
here's a movie that you would think from whereas Victory, you can see the fit at least. Here is a film where John Huston, are you kidding me? That's
this feels like, well, you had like with West Side Story this past year. This feels like a classic director that has done everything there is to do, like Spielberg going, you know what, I haven't done a musical, and I want to do it. I want to try my hand at that. This feels like I've never done a musical. Let's do that. And Annie is I chose this because it's John Huston, and Annie is not a beloved film for me. I don't have an emotional connection to it. I don't love the musical. I love musicals. I've spent the vast majority of my life doing them and doing them professionally. Annie is a beloved family musical because it absolutely you get kids on stage, and kids it is the this is the early 80s. This is the birth of the sassy child on screen. Well, I mean, we've had sassy children, but really leaning into the kids are smarter than the adults, and let's get all the sass. That is Annie, and that and it's and it does have some really catchy tunes. The musical does. So that being said, I don't want I don't want people thinking that I think Annie is the greatest.
No, it's just a stunning 1-2 punch.
It's a 1-2 punch.
But when you look at it on that these were made really at just the exact same time. It is kind of amazing that he accomplished this. These were two big widescreen, big released films. I guess Victory was released by Lorimar and had a lot of European financial participation in it. But Annie was supposed to be, there were several of them that were supposed to be. But Annie was supposed to be the big holiday event of 1982.
It was going to be the big event. Yeah.
And it's considered something of a flop because it was only the 9th highest grossing movie of 1982. But it hardly flopped. It was actually a very, very big hit. It just wasn't movie of the year. It didn't get a bunch of Oscar nominations.
Yeah.
And it cost a ton to make.
And it cost a ton. It's all made and manufactured in front of you. The bridge at the end of the movie, the estates, the White House, it's all old studio manufactured thing. And I think the staginess is kind of neat. I like that the orphanage feels like it's a little bit on a stage, you know what I mean? Like, I actually think that it's a stage musical, so I think the artificiality of it works well for it.
And it plays to the artificiality of it, even
to build
even
a
the
giant
super
period
rich
movie,
stuff,
with all that music and choreography. It was a big, expensive endeavor.
It reminds you this was based on a comic strip.
Yeah.
So it doesn't
absolutely
have to
is.
But the songs are beloved, and they're beloved. Just to get this out, and then I'll step back on Annie, which I really enjoy. But it's beloved by girls at the time and throughout history in a way that I think the four of us maybe can't quite fully understand, even though we're all very sympathetic toward musical theater as a genre. We can definitely say that at least.
And it does
girls
have
connect with this character and her journey and what she goes through in a way that we
and it does have a pretty terrific cast of Albert Finney's Albert Finney. He's Albert Finney, but Carol Burnett, Tim Curry, Bernadette Peters, great stage performers of the time. And this
may not be the perfect movie, but that trio, are you going to do better than that?
Yeah.
Ever? You're not.
And
so
to have this movie, to have it as a little time capsule or a little a thing to chronicle how great Anne Reinking it was as a performer. Wow. She is so amazing, so lovely, so beautiful, and so wonderful in this film.
She leaves a little bit of her natural edge as a performer at the door to do this movie because it's such a family-friendly movie. But in a way, it's fun that this is the outlier in her filmography. Is this wonderful leading lady that has all of the superstardom that a leading lady should have for somebody that wasn't quite as universally known at the time.
Yeah,
and she brings so much musical theater integrity to the thing in every scene that she's in every move that she makes, just the way she crosses her legs, everything she does has this physical musical theater authority to it that I adore. And
and real quick, I just want to mention Eileen Quinn as the titular Annie, as a child performer. Really, she has to do a ton of heavy lifting in this, and she's a kid and does it. So I want to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, I've never seen this after all these many years. It has always seemed to me to be too saccharine for me to even give my time to.
Right. Which it is.
I flippin' loved it. I watched it last night, so it's very fresh. I loved it. And in spite of myself, I'm like, I'll give this a shot. But I cried like a dozen times. I'm like, what is going on here? I adored it. And the performers, the Eileen Quinn was amazing. It was, and I know some of the songs obviously, but going in when Easy Street started and I realized, oh my God, this is it. And it's these three performers. I literally began to salivate. I'm like, this is going to be so, so good. And these three are at the top of their game. I love that. The little girl that played, is it Molly? Wow. I mean, she kind of stole the limelight from Eileen Quinn a little bit, just because she was, I thought, even more interesting. The songs were fun. The production values were just gorgeous. I literally was shocked at how much I liked this movie. I got done and I'm like, what is this? But the thing that fascinated me, though, is because you're right, it is still saccharine, but I was so moved. I was shocked by the violence at the end.
Yep, totally.
When he smacks Carol Burnett, and then the next 10 shots, you see her just laying there.
Yeah,
I was really.
Here's. I mean, but you bring this up, so I that was the thing that I did not remember about it. Ooh. Was how violent. But I also, and I'm like, as if you brought your family to this film, everything's been everything you probably could want from this film for 2/3 of it, and then the whole end. You get people getting beaten. You're going to kill a kid, and how many times do they say "goddamn kid"?
Yes,
you goddamn kid, over and over and over. And I'm like,
you could do that in the 80s.
Yeah, I know you could. But if you brought
of course, the musical doesn't end this way, at
all.
So this and the big going to the movie sequence where they attempt to graft a big cinematic ending and a big, sort of pay on to whatever that.
You want a screeching halt of a number that should be
has nothing to do with it
from movie history. It was. I'm like, I remember thinking this years ago, just going, I mean, it's John Huston going, well, all musicals have a Busby Berkeley number, don't they? Yeah. Still in the 80s? Yes, I'm going to do it. And you know what? Just to make sure I make my point, I'm going to make it take like 30 minutes.
Right. And it's not so much that I hate it. I enjoy that because I love the widescreen splendor of it. Yeah. I do. And I like what he's paying homage to, and I think he's doing a good job of it. It does stop the movie, though. There's no denying that. What I don't like is what they lost from the musical in the expense of that. The hobos, there's a whole bunch of stuff that they had to get rid of in the middle of the movie to fit that in, and that makes me sad. But I'll just say, even as a kid in 1982, even as a 10-year-old, I effing love the ending because there's big action ending with a helicopter in that era of movie making, when you'd gone to see Empire Strikes Back and you saw Tron earlier in the summer, and Wrath of Khan, like I needed an ending like that for the movie to really work on me as a child. I don't know that I need it today. I think the little "we outsmarted you" ending of the musical might have been enough, but I don't think it's enough for event cinema of 1982. And I think what they did come up with has high stakes and is still somewhat, even though you're right, it's pretty harsh, it's somewhat thematically in keeping with what the ending of the musical actually is.
Yeah. And because we were talking about the ending, and it is important also to mention in this movie the horrible cultural racism with the characters of Punjab and Asp. You have to mention it. It's something that is. It's gross. It is gross now, but it was 1982. If for some reason you haven't seen the movie and you're listening to this or watching this, at the end. Punjab is a huge hero, but it is.
When we saw it, we loved him.
Yeah.
So it's one of those weird things where you're like, it's when you watch it today, it's not acceptable.
It's pretty cringeworthy.
It's totally cringeworthy. It was a great
dance number, but
and so but it's worth mentioning just so people aren't like thinking that we're just glossing over it. We don't see it.
You into a trap.
Get it? And you just have to swallow and
you got to get over it, or you got to excise way too much stuff that's culturally appropriate, that's culturally important from the past. We just, as film historians, we sort of made our peace with that.
Yeah, Rob, the guy who reviews plays and musicals for a living, give us your take on Annie.
Okay, well, first of all, I loved this as a kid. I loved this movie as a kid, so I can't see it with fresh eyes again. Right. And George loved this when he was about 7 years old, and so we watched it over and over again. Then I reviewed a production of this in December, I think, the Children's Theater Company. I was surprised because I hadn't seen it on stage before. Surprised how different. It's the same story, but the ending's different.
The same story. The big songs are all still there, but plot-wise, it's pretty different.
Yep. In the play, Sandy disappears for most of the show.
Then you don't have to keep track of the whole dog the entire time on stage.
Exactly. But watching it. So after I saw it on stage, I watched the film again in December. So I just sort of scanned through the scenes again while I was recuperating. Or that was my intention, but then I ended up just sort of watching it all again. Because I Annie, the girl playing Annie, is just really good.
Yeah.
And she won a Razzie Award.
Yeah.
Let's
try not to speak the word Razzie on the show.
That just tells you
we have absolutely no respect for the work.
It tells you what a total shit thing that whole premise is.
In terms of Razzie, you can use the S word on the show uncensored, Joel, because they suck.
They do. And the chemistry between her and Anne Reinking, the Annie and Grace in this are great. But you're right, Carol Burnett, go.
And the legitimacy with which
so good.
Albert Finney lends to her in every scene, like it really is everyone's doing really, really good work from that standpoint, and I love it for that reason.
It's, the one interesting thing, and I read as I was sort of looking through some stuff, is apparently John Huston was passed out through most of this movie or drunk. And the crew basically just kind of knew what he wanted to do, and they just did it.
And they're like, this would seem like a Huston shot. Yeah, I read that too, and it's great.
Which, from what I know of John Huston, that's really believable.
It tracks. Yeah, it totally tracks.
At this point, he was pretty.
Yeah, it would. This stage. It was originally staged on Broadway by Mike Nichols. And it makes me wonder what a Mike Nichols film version would have looked like. So that's just a little thing. Let's move on and talk about another beloved movie. And it's Michael's double feature. And the first movie in that chronologically, 1980s 9 to 5.
You guys know that I love this movie so deeply. I mean,
you're not alone. 9 to 5 it's such a time capsule of a film, and yet it aged so incredibly well, which is the marvel of it. But I'll let you start. It's your movie.
I saw this as a child, so of course I didn't get all of the insights as far as the harassment and Franklin Hart being such a douchebag. But it's funny. It's such a lovely piece of filmmaking, and I think the strength. Obviously, the three leads, their performances are just undeniably brilliant,
and their chemistry with each other is viable.
Yeah, and the script is so well done. Every time I watch it anew, I'm like, the writing here. And the characters are so distinct in their voices, and I don't know. This movie is a safe space for me, despite its subject matter. But I go to this, because it's just it makes me happy. There's nothing other than that, and it is the performers, and even beyond the three leads. I mean, Dabney Coleman and Elizabeth Roz. I can't think of her last name. All of
Elizabeth Wilson.
Wilson. Thank you.
Her last film.
This was?
Yeah.
No, she was. She was in Addams Family Values.
Really?
Or Addams Family.
Oh, then who am I thinking of?
I don't know. She
I thought it was Roz.
But I don't know. This movie makes me happy. I mean, from the very opening where, Judy comes in with the hat and Lily Tomlin's like, we're going to need a special locker for the hat. I'm like, come on. Yep. This dialogue is brilliant. And obviously the fact that, these three women have remained friends all these years, and obviously Grace and Frankie.
Locker for the Hat was an improv by Jane Fonda.
Was it really?
Yeah, this movie doesn't have a very good script. I'll get to why I believe that and why every moment you mentioned is going to be. No, I don't want to poo on 9 to 5. 9 to 5 was made by Colin Higgins, who in the era, he had only brief time on the earth with us making these farces that he made, which are really wonderful. He pulled himself out of obscurity by writing the script for Harold and Maude back in the early 70s. He wrote Silver Streak, which I adore. He wrote A Foul Play, which I love, and directed Foul Play. And then this film, and then Best Little Whorehouse in Texas. And then that was pretty much it for him. He died pretty young. But he took this script, 9 to 5, which Jane Fonda produced this film. It's her IPC Films, it's her shingle. And so it's her, she's the reason it exists in the first place, because it was Patricia, what's her name? The screenwriter.
Patricia Resnick. Yep.
She wrote this story about these three administrative professionals who conspire to murder their boss. And it really is that. And then it's definitely a calamity of errors that comes as a result of that. But it's not about three women who get stoned and imagine they're going to kill their boss. It's about three women killing their boss, and the sort of weird cat and mouse stuff a la Fritz Lang's films that we talked about that come after the fact. So it was a much, much darker thing, but which survives in the movie wonderfully, that had that social commentary of what women go through in these sort of situations at that time, probably even worse in the 50s. Joel's mother-in-law, I won't name her by name because she didn't know she was going to be on the show today, but I heard her talk about Mad Men at a garden party one time.
Yeah.
And she hates Mad Men. I love Mad Men because it's, you get the cars and the costumes and it's all romanticized and stuff. But when she thinks of the 50s, she can only think of how her sex was just a slave race of people with absolutely no anything in their lives. Mm-hmm. And when she looks at, she's like, and now you're going to parties dressed up like these people. Like, she was offended by even the idea of it because she felt so vehemently about it. Yep. Thankfully, Patricia in her writing has that, and that, even though it's very softened in the movie, it's still there. And Fonda in particular keeps track of it really well throughout the film, I think. But all of them reverting to what they do best. Lily Tomlin's goofiness and her witty reactions to things, a lot of that was made up on the scene. And Higgins was like, great, if you can do it better, do it. And the hidden star of the thing, if it's partly it's Dabney Coleman, who never played a nice guy again, except in one movie because of this. He was hired because he was a nice guy that they would enjoy doing this stuff with. Lily Tomlin says the most fun she ever had in a movie was working with him in the office scenes or where he's tied up and stuff. They just got along so well. Fonda insisted he be cast in On Golden Pond a couple years later because he was getting typecast as an asshole. And she wanted to let him play this nice guy, which he barely can pull off in On Golden Pond because we all just think of him one way, but he was a delight and they all adored him. And that, in a weird way, that energy is in the film in a positive way that keeps the thing buoyant, even though if you really think about what they're doing, it's terrible.
Yeah.
But Dolly Parton, never been in a movie before, but she thought all movies were made in order. She had to learn all this stuff. They're teasing her about it throughout the film. But her natural comic timing and her honest to God, holy cow reactions to everything, like she manages to upstage Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda almost every time she's on screen with them when she's not even really doing anything, and it's kind of amazing to see, I think.
Well, I remember reading, I think it was Ebert's review, and if I recall right, but it's like they're talking about just watch her in the scenes where she's not talking.
Right.
Because just her reactions are just so correct and organic, and right. it is I think it is an example of actor chemistry that is bar none some of the best ever captured. Those three women together. That pot scene it makes me happy in a way I can't even explain, because it looks like they're really actually fun. All high. I mean,
the screenwriter struggled with finding that was a Colin Higgins special. Basically, he's like, how do I get Patricia's the meaning of her thing in this film, even though all I really want to do is tell a fun farce where nobody gets hurt and everything's okay. I don't want to murder anybody, but at the same time, the fantasy of it, how do I get that in the movie? And that's a pretty brilliant way of solving that problem, in my opinion.
My favorite performance moment for Dabney Coleman in this is when he is playing the assistant or secretary. Just the way he does that is so.
And Dolly's fantasy in the Old West.
Miss Rhodes, I'm a married man.
Yeah.
Oh God, so good.
No, I mean, I think that this movie, I think, like you said, it holds up beautifully, and it still has a message that's still.
Yeah, sadly, it holds. I mean, there's an element that we wish that this movie, that we looked at it like a time capsule, like it'd be, but yeah, there's.
It is in terms of the fashions, the furniture, the cars, all that stuff.
Right, absolutely.
Super 1980, but
absolutely.
But thematically, it's still unfortunately very rich.
I toyed with the idea of playing the joke that I know Michael would love, like what I do for Mommy Dearest when I side with when I sided with Joan Crawford. But I was going to, I was going to do I was like, maybe I should do the joke on Michael where I talk about this movie illustrates how difficult it is to be a man in the work, and I'm like, no, I can't do it because this is still too happening
true.
True. Yeah.
I mean, the other thing I'll say real quick about 9 to 5, I think one of the other strengths is the editing. I mean, some of their transitions are just so hysterical.
Where Colin, and this is true of all of his films,
yeah.
where Colin chooses to leave a scene, and occasionally where he starts one, but definitely where he's like, yep, we got it. Get out of here. Like that. Those sorts of cuts are just joyful.
The one that always pops into my head is when Violet is changing or fixing the garage, and she's talking about, I got to play the good girl, whatever. Yep. And the thing goes down and she's happy. And then before it even cuts, you hear her voiceover, what? Going into the next section where he's saying you didn't get the promotion. Things like that. It's so snappy. I think that's what I like about the dialogue, even though, like you're saying, a lot of it might've been improv, but it's just, it's so
they
well
captured
done.
Good improvs, basically. It wasn't like it's not like First Wives Club where they just sat them down at a table and everybody just started making crap up and it's this cacophony of noise and nonsense. They improved in the process of doing the movie, and what worked, they polished up and kept. And, being willing to let that happen, I don't think Colin had much choice. I mean, you're not going to hire Lily Tomlin and ever just say only what's on the page.
Well,
but
also structurally, I love how they do the fantasy stuff, and then you start to see it unfold in real life. But if you're not paying attention, you're going to be like, oh, wait. And I love that it starts out kind of subtle, until Judy, of course, uses the gun, but she ties him up. But
even that, they all do the things that they do in those fantasies, and the consequences are totally different in the movie. Even though it's still a comedy, that's very clever, actually.
Yeah. I just adore this film. So.
And the whole middle section with the running around with the wrong corpse and stuff. I mean, that's fairly stupid, but Colin's so good at that sort of thing that it just flies and is very fun. And
but okay, let me say one more great delivery is the Lily Tomlin, where they look in the trunk, they see it's not Hart, and they're like, Violet, can we see you for a second? She's like, what is going on? Who is that? Come on.
It's an absolute stormer. That is it. Yeah, it's so
one
good.
thing before we move on, and we have to, this is already the longest show ever. If you haven't or you don't own the DVD of this movie, the Blu-ray is really hard to find, and it's owned by Disney now, so good luck getting a new one. But the DVD is still pretty much abundantly out there, even if you have to buy it used. If you're a fan of the movie, you really need to, even though you can get it streaming everywhere, you should get that. It has a audio commentary with the three principal women on it, which if you're a fan of the movie, you can't die before you listen to that once. It's so fun and informative, but mostly it's just super fun. And you just need to see it for that. It's got a lot of fun stuff on it. It's got the theme song karaoke and all kinds of goofy crap. There's not like a serious examination of the film, but getting Fonda, Parton, and Colin back in the room to watch the movie with you is stunning. One of my favorite.
And that's on the DVD?
It's on the DVD, yeah.
Okay.
I believe.
So you don't have to track down the Blu-ray.
No, it's on the original DVD, the anniversary edition, which the anniversary we've well moved on from now.
Right.
But they're talking, and Fonda's giving this story. I always thought she's talking about Roger Vadim from the Space Hooker movie, whatever that's called.
Barbarella.
Yeah. She's talking about sleeping with the boss, basically, and this experience that she had. She could be talking about anybody. She doesn't name him by name, but I was like, I wonder if she's talking about him, because she definitely slept with and later married him. And he was the boss on Barbarella. And she's just giving this sort of confessional in this Jane Fonda sort of way, the way she kind of does. And Dolly Parton, at the end of it, when it gets quiet and nobody knows how to react, Dolly Parton goes, well, I slept with the boss and they fired me anyway.
Oh God. Absolute national. All three of those were national treasures.
Jane Fonda and Lily Tomlin did that TV series again together. These people have crossed paths because they loved this experience.
I just was watching it. Popped up. I don't even know how it popped up, but they were doing like a thing for Vanity Fair. It was just Lily Tomlin and Jane Fonda, where they're asking, like they're like doing a Google search of what comes up when they when you start typing, does Lily Tomlin, and then just what it auto fills. Mm-hmm. And so they're just asking, and the two of them just bantering back and forth, and they're actually bantering about the different awards that they've won. Right. And it's so funny, the kind of the lovely ribbing that they give each other. I want to give Rob so if you see that, it's really great, and that's a Grace and Frankie thing. Rob, I want to give you a chance to say one more thing about 9 to 5, if you have it, before we move on to the second of Michael's double feature. I feel like we cut you off.
I saw it. I think I saw this in the theater. Way too young, because I don't think I got much of it, and I hadn't seen it again since. So revisiting it, I really enjoyed it.
Yeah,
really enjoyed it.
Michael's double feature, the tie-in between the two, is of course Miss Lily Tomlin, which brings us to our final movie that we are discussing on the longest show ever. And frankly,
dare I say the greatest movie on this list of 8 films?
Oh, I dare you to say it. I'm not sure that makes it true, but I dare you to say it. Michael, tell us about your other film.
Well, it is another kind of girl power goofy comedy with
another absolute balls out farce too.
Yes, I mean it's ridiculous. It doesn't have kind of the social message that 9 to 5 has, but it's Big Business, which is of course Lily Tomlin. That's the tie-in to 9 to 5, and then of course the great Bette Midler, them playing mismatched twins. You know, one set is brought up in the city, one set is brought up in the country, and then their paths cross as 40-year-olds. This movie is just pure goofiness, and I have loved this. I saw this in the theater, so this is somewhere in my top 20, as is 9 to 5. And this is also great performances, not just from them, but I mean, you got Edward Herrmann, Daniel Jarrell, Fred Ward. It's just this amazing supporting cast, and it is a great big, like Ryan said, farce. But one of the things, and I quote this movie on a daily basis, is the dialogue, because I'm like, I can't remember the screenwriter's name, but I'm like, he's got to be a gay man. I mean, the snark. And
it's credited to Dory Pearson and Mark Reed Rubel.
Okay, I don't know.
Or Rubel.
Whatever. Maybe that's a stereotype, but the snarkiness in this is so wonderfully hysterical.
Well, and who directed it? Carl?
No, Jim Abrams.
No, Jim Abrams.
Oh, right.
Top Secret and Airplane.
Yeah.
But it's the dialogue is what's so much fun about it. The story is really fun. It's very goofy, but the dialogue, especially from the rich, snooty Bette Midler character, the city brought up one. I mean, when she gets a call from Michael Gross of Family Ties and Lily Tomlin's the boyfriend, and she's like, "Who was on the phone?" "A heavy breather with intestinal wool." I'm like, I mean, this is what the whole movie is, and it's just
before you get into all your list of favorite moments, and there are a bunch that are joyful. I don't think you adequately set up the premise of what this thing is.
Okay.
You almost got there, but the important thing isn't that they're these separated twins who somehow still knew each other and have lived very different existences. The point of the movie is, and this is it, if you ever want to read a funny Roger Ebert review, read his review of this, because he hated this, and yet. He hated it, and yet, well, I'll get to my feelings about that. He hated it because he claimed it's a movie where something almost happens but never happens, and he just found that an exercise for him in tedium, because these two couples arrive in this same place, and they almost bump into each other, but then they don't quite, and this happens, I don't know how many times.
Yeah.
It's the whole first 2/3 of the film, really, and Ebert didn't like that. He thought that was stupid, but I'm not sure that, I mean, no offense to him, I don't think that's fair. I don't think it's fair to rip on something for what it is. There's tension in that. It's a game that we all get to, I mean, I can understand how if you weren't in the mood for Big Business, you wouldn't like it. I don't think it's great at all, but you have to. And one of my dear memories is I watched this in the right circumstances. I watched it with Michael. Michael's always wanting to watch it. We watched it in college together. And I'm always like, I don't want to watch that. So it's just like, I don't want to watch it. And then one night, big business, blah, blah, blah.
VHS.
I was like, okay, cool. Yeah, let's watch that. And the look on his face was like, really? Like, we're actually going to watch it? I'm like, yeah, let's watch it. Fucking. And so we put the movie in, and we're rolling. We were laughing at every stupid thing that happens in it. It is clever. There's a wit to it. It's not just stupid, but it more than anything, it's this. It has nothing to do with what's written. It certainly has nothing to do with the end of the movie or whatever ends up happening in the movie that isn't important and I don't even care about. What the fun of it is that physical, it's almost gonna happen. That if you can't have fun with that, you shouldn't watch it or anything like it, because you gotta just let go and let the thing be what it's gonna be. That energy that came from that. And these two geek kids in college in the middle of the night just cackling, watching Big Business. I mean, it was a moment of joy. So I'm always grateful for it, even though I can't think of anything super nice to say about it artistically. I do like the. I mean, it's not garbage either. Abrams knows where to point the camera and how to keep things going, and the costumes. Fantastic for a
you look like a blood
1988 film. It is so gross. Everything's so terrible, and I'm like, God, we used to dress like this. Like, really, people did. It's not just they're not making some comment about 1988. This is what they think people are supposed to look like, and it's just tacky and terrible, but in a glorious way, I think.
So. For me, I did not have a Michael Klug in my life showing me movies. So when this came out and was at the video store, I said, I don't want to see that. And I never did until now. And I was surprised. I rolled my eyes when I saw this on the list. Because I thought I knew what it was.
Right.
And I just had a blast with it. Mickey and I watched it and that was so fun. I expected that to be absolute late 80s crap, like the epitome of a Abbott and Costello movie, where after the first two, they just started making the same movie over and over again.
Well, it is kind of that, but that
it is, but it worked. It worked for me. I loved it. I had a blast with it, and I loved the characters.
Yes,
Lily Tomlin, both characters she played, and Bette Midler, you kind of hate or roll your eyes at both of hers, but she does them so well.
Yes.
And then all those supporting Edward Herrmann and his partner. I loved that. I loved Seth Green, the little Seth Green in it, as a brat kid that just like no.
Are you trying to raise a child or a CEO? Well, I'll raise both.
It's a very Marx Brothers feel to it.
And even at the
very
beginning,
zany and very goofy.
The birth scene.
Yeah.
Just the urine sample.
Yes.
It's just like,
gratitude. Yeah.
Somebody says something at the end. And it's just like, I missed it the first time I watched it, because I watched it twice in preparation for this, because I watched it. It was like one of the first ones I watched when he first set it up. Yeah. And now I came to time, like, I can't remember any specifics because I'm over 50 now. And I just can't remember specifics, it seems. And this time I caught it when she leaves the room. You hear somebody in the room then say, or she says, "That's gratitude," or something like that for you. Like, so they don't even focus on that. No. That's like a gag you miss.
Yeah.
It's just this little thing in there. Who would have thought this movie? You look at the poster, you see who's in it, not understanding the history of Lily Tomlin and all the great things she did before and after. You're just thinking Bette Midler, loud. She's going to be the loud one and whatever. It's going to just be stupid. I don't want to see that or whatever. And then it's like there's going to be
like a fox
rewarded on repeat viewings. That's crazy. I loved it.
Yay, that makes me so happy.
Joel? And then we got a book, so we can keep this under an hour, 2.5 hours.
I think we should move on.
Joel
didn't like
you can't say something nice about something, right, Joel?
If you can't say something nice about Bette Midler, you shouldn't say anything at all.
Fair enough.
She's just a performer that I appreciate her as a what she is in the moviedom and the larger, and but it's just I've never had a performance where I've connected to her at all.
Interesting.
I felt the same way.
And
one
I
of the
feel
reasons
like
I never wanted to touch this.
Yeah, and I feel like
she was great.
I think she was doing what she felt she was supposed to do, but I never feel like there's a, as crazy and as wacky as it is, Lily Tomlin, the wackiness is still grounded in a reality. And Bette Midler, I always feel like Bette Midler is commenting on wackiness. She is indicating wackiness. She is showing wackiness instead of letting her, and that's just something, and that's how it always reads to me.
I can totally see that.
And so that is something I've never connected with her. Even when she's doing dramatic work or when she's doing whatever, I never connect to her. And that's so, yeah, I get, knowing that the plot is loosely comedy of errors. That track, I'm like, oh yeah, I get the beats of this movie. It's, but I also, when I've kind of maybe it's like there are days where you're in the mood to watch Airplane, and there are days where you're just like, oh, this is exhausting, and and so knowing that like the urine sample bit, and right off the top, and so this is a bit on me. When I saw that, and I was just like, oh crap, I'm not in the mood to watch this movie. I'm not gonna. This is gonna be a slog because I am not here for that joke. That's a crap joke. So I
joke.
You're right. It's a number one. But yeah, no. So I don't know. Do I love Big Business? Certainly not. Do I get? Do I judge Michael for loving it? A little.
Yes.
No. No, so yeah, it's just it is and I certainly don't want to, I don't want to bring it, I certainly don't want to bring the show to end this on a bummer. It to me, when you compare but so let's talk about what is great. Lily Tomlin is amazing. I was just reading, before any of her Rose Chelton scenes, Lily Tomlin would spin around in a circle until she got dizzy and then do the scene. And I'm like, I love that. That's hilarious. So she could feel that slight disorientation. And that is, so Lily Tomlin is really, really, really good in this. And that should absolutely be celebrated. So yeah. But there you go. Our dear listeners, did you really think we were going to come in at under 2 hours with this show? No. I don't think I think you all knew when you heard that this was a episode. You knew that this was going to go a little long. So we really absolutely do appreciate you sticking with us as we talk about these 8 films. That's a lot of films to kind of go into, and but there is something to love about absolutely all of these films. So if you haven't, for some reason, if you haven't checked out Capricorn 1, if you haven't seen 9 to 5, I mean, come on, let's your life is about to improve. So obviously, if you have any comments, questions, reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook, at Ask Joel and Ryan, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And if you are watching this on YouTube, like and subscribe. Go ahead. We're here. You've seen four really pretty glasses faces. Glasses faces. Oh boy, sometimes these things just get away from me. But yeah, we absolutely love it. Michael, Rob, so happy to have you guys. So great to see you guys again.
Glad to be back.
We are hopefully gonna do this real soon. Last word goes to Ryan for this episode.
Keep the faith. Don't lose your head.
There you go. Keep the faith. Don't lose your head. We thank you all so much for coming out and listening to us, letting us into your ear holes. Take care, everybody. Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Bye.
Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.
Bravo!